Welcome to another session of Technology by Performix. I'm Ken Umansky, your host, and today we'll explore more of the world of technology. My guest today is Glavin Vijaya, the founder and CEO of Loretta AI, where he leads the development of privacy-preserving AI systems that analyze human behavior and intent. He serves as principal investigator on major U.S. government projects with the TSA, DHS, and U.S. Air Force advancing AI for national security and transportation. His current focus is on ethical AI deployment in public spaces. Welcome, Glavin. Thanks for joining me today. I'm really interested in hearing how you're using AI to analyze human behavior for many of the U.S. government agencies that are responsible for national security. So let's just get started.
Yeah,
Um,
thanks, Ken.
I'm
Appreciate being here.
really glad you're here because it's a very interesting subject and one I'm not really familiar with.
Yeah,
How is the role of
yeah,
AI evolving in physical spaces like airports, malls, or public venues? You know, you walk into an airport and you don't, you know that there's a lot of security around, especially with TSA, obviously. But, you know, the front end of that airport has a lot of people going through it, and I know that there are cameras out there. So tell me how AI is being used there in that space and how I should feel more secure when I walk through that space in an airport.
yeah. Thanks, Ken. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I think this is something that we've been working on for a number of years. Um, One of the things that has been a mainstay of public spaces is the CCTV cameras looking over you. And I think one of the questions that I asked myself when I looked at all of these is what is going through the mind of the person standing in the room looking at all of the CCTV cameras? Does he feel like Batman, right? Or does he feel absolutely out of his depth with all of the information coming in? And I think what we have found is that it's a little bit of both. On one hand, there are many CCTV cameras where the security guard standing at the end, inside. First of all, there are many of them where you just see an empty swiveling chair and there's nobody there at all. And all the way on the other hand, you have those where you have huge control center rooms where I feel even more terrified of what's going on as you look through it. Um, and one of the things that makes it really difficult is what the first step of the process is. And the first step of the process is actually not the question of looking for a threat, it is identifying who you're supposed to be looking at. And that is the key to how these systems work, which is that the 10 people sitting behind the screen, they kind of have this peripheral vision to see anything obvious, and then they have their focus vision look at maybe two or three significant people or activities that are going on. And that's kind of how security really happens in these places. Um, and yeah, with AI today, you have two things that are really interesting. One is the ability to observe consistently across all of the screens, and that's great. And that's been happening for many years now with things like your smart AI systems, people detection systems, and all of that. With modern AI in the year, with like ChatGPT and all of that, the thing that's really interesting is the ability to comprehend the data as a whole rather than as individual pieces. And that's kind of the next step where we can start to identify not just a physical activity, whether malicious or benign, but start to look a little bit more into the intent behind the activity and perhaps whether there's a real need to actually interact with them.
So how do you figure out intent?
So I think so before that, I think one way of looking at it is to look at um, kind of you watch TV and you look at things like NCIS or CSI, and then what they'll see is you'll see kind of two distinct behavior types. One is how the policeman kind of, in the first 15 minutes of the show where somebody randomly gets arrested, right? That there's that police version of it, and
Right.
then there is that kind of investigator version of it, which is the rest of the video, rest of the movie. And so there are kind of two ways that people are looking at intent. In the policeman's mind is kind of 80% pattern recognition, and then 20% triggering based on the activity that they see, right? So it's like 80% they're like, okay, it's 3 a.m. in the morning and the person is walking down the road. The odds of him doing something suspicious is fairly high. And so a fairly small infraction might be something I trigger. Whereas in a big bustling area, somebody's kind of acting crazy in a public place, they still don't randomly go and arrest the person. A little bit of that. Um, the second part of it is what the investigator does. And where the investigator comes in is they aggregate small pieces of evidence and contextualize it together. Now, with Loretta and with our company, the main technology that we kind of built is the ability to do something called non-biometric tracking. That is to say, rather than saying that there are 30,000 people generating a billion different images or frames where a risk may be found, we would say 30,000 people create 30,000 journeys. And every journey has a series of activities that may aggregate up to something that has is more than the sum of the activities. And that's what we see as where we can infer intent. I give you a really simple example that happens in airports a lot, right? In airports, there is one activity that you can do in the airport that is perfectly okay, that you cannot do in any other public place. And that is take out your bag, put it on the ground, and have a nap, right? It's okay at the airport because like it's probably not your fault. It's
Yeah,
probably some plane that you missed, some transfer that you missed, and now you're taking a nap on the floor and nobody's going to talk to you about it.
yeah,
Because of that, there are also a lot of homeless people who hang out in airports.
yeah.
And a homeless person is completely a benign person, right? It's not a danger. Most of them are not a danger to society or anything like that. But at the same time, these people are building a series of behaviors that could identify that they might need help.
Mhm.
And that series of behaviors is something that you can identify over time.
Okay. Wow. So AI helps you gather more data points.
That's right. So the two parts of that is gathering more data points. Um, and this is kind of another really interesting innovation because a lot of security systems, they don't gather all the information they get. They are a trigger-based system. A trigger-based system says a fight is happening. And that's the first time you see the person is in 10 frames where a fight happens.
Okay.
With a lot of our systems, what we do is we have that narrative of the person's profile. So by the time there is a fight, we would know, for example, that he is punching his brother or somebody he came into the place with. And
Mhm.
it's like, yeah, that is an issue, but it's not really a police issue. Like that is a family issue. Let's not deal with that, right? And so that's kind of where small pieces of data that we capture earlier that allows us to contextualize a trigger. And so that's how we capture the information.
So if there's somebody suspicious that you see,
Yeah.
can you use AI to get a almost an instantaneous dossier on them so you understand who they are, et cetera?
So one of the things that Loretta does is that we try to do the opposite of that. And so a lot of systems, so one of the biggest user of security AI outside of critical infrastructure and government people are casinos. And casinos were the first adopter of full-scale facial recognition. So every single person that walks into a casino is scanned against a list of a blacklist of people who they don't want to play in the casino. Not necessarily criminals, sometimes people who are just incredible at counting cards or whatever. It's
Mhm.
legal, right? It's just please do it elsewhere, right? So that kind of thing. Um, Systems like that, they don't trigger you based on your behavior. They're triggering and deciding what to do with you based on your history. I think that systems like that lead down a path that is very dangerous, right? Because that essentially means that there is no ability to kind of change who you are. Like your past is defining your future. A lot of what we do is we build all of our data based on the behavior that you capture in that day or that moment. A lot of the data that we build is then aggregated and de-anonymized from you at the end of 24 hours. There's no memory between days and so on and so forth. A big part of that is so that there is a clean slate whenever you enter into a building, right? And so, yeah,
Well, that gets me to my next question. There's a lot of concern about surveillance and privacy, and I don't want Big Brother watching me. How can AI be deployed in a way that improves security without compromising individual rights, especially privacy?
yeah.
Sounds like you're about to tell me that.
I think so. That is a good question, and I think the philosophy of intent over identity is kind of very important to the way we do that,
Yeah.
because there is a point of which your behavior then warrants us doing a background check on you, right? There is a moment where you are maybe causing a very serious infraction. You're, um, for example, taking away other people's rights to safety, doing dangerous stuff, essentially. Okay, maybe at that point in time, you are a criminal based on the activity that you did that very moment. At that point in time, okay, it's time to kind of look back into it, kind of to understand a little bit of context to decide the degree of which the interaction had to happen. But in all other cases, the way that we see it is that at one moment in time with one activity, there is absolutely nobody that takes that one activity and decides who you are based on that one activity. The question is, what is your reference data? And your reference data can come from two locations. You can either say the identity reference data, which is I can recognize that this kind of person or whatever this kind of person means has a risk, or you can go by the other way, which is to say you can pattern recognition in the opposite direction that says these kind of behaviors in aggregate are at risk. Mm. Mm.
Okay, so it's a
Yeah,
pattern recognition that really helps you identify behavior that could be aberrant. Is that true?
yeah. I think it's a question of micro behaviors, behaviors at that moment aggregate to your intent at that moment, and you should be treated based on your current intent
Okay.
rather than on your history. And that's kind of where we separate out these things. Now, the technology to make that happen is really interesting, but I think it's an interesting way to think about AI, which is that with AI, you have two major components of how AI is going to interact with our world. One is around speed of doing the things that you're already doing.
Okay.
And second is in generating of new data, which then leads to new opportunities. Um, and it's kind of two ways around that, right? Because you can say, okay, if I do something fast enough, I could probably build a system on top of it. That's like digital marketing. Where it's like, okay, I now track hitboxes from place to place so fast that I can build a whole framework on top of it. I now invent digital marketing on top of it, that kind of thing. Then there is that second part of it, which is around building new data. A lot of what we believe makes a lot of sense is building a human entity-driven data. That is data linked to the person and your behavior today, and then from there, kind of taking it forward in different directions.
Okay. So explain how AI can infer a person's intent just by tracking behavior. And why is this something that matters in today's threat landscape? I mean, you know, so what I'm gleaning off of what you're saying is that you have a database of how people have how many people have behaved in that same situation. If
Right.
you see that in terms of behavior that's going to be aberrant, you already know that based on the data that you've collected in the past. Is that true? Is that how that works?
There is a little bit of pattern recognition,
Okay.
and there is a little bit of understanding through aggregation, through understanding a whole series of activities.
Okay.
Let me give you, so if you think about the homeless person in the airport example that we talked about earlier,
Right.
what is the behavior that we're looking at? We're looking at these three behaviors. One is that they were there the whole day, obviously, but the two interesting ones are um, the disassociation with anyone. So they don't actually interact with any shop, machine or person in the whole time that they are there.
Yeah.
And so, to some extent, they are just existing in the space, so to
Right.
speak. And existing in the space is the activity that we're identifying. No image of you doing nothing means that you are dangerous, but the aggregate of you doing nothing over all of this time means that you probably have a different reason for being there. That doesn't involve,
So
the services that are provided, right?
let me take that a step further. So say
Yeah,
the homeless person is really a bad guy. In other words, he is he is masquerading as a homeless person, but in fact has ill intent in that airport. How do you
yeah.
do that out?
So ill intent is a fascinating one. And this is kind of things that working at the TSA, you kind of get a little bit of an insight into kind of the things that they're thinking about. Ill intent in the airport kind of falls into two or three major categories. One is what they call being a mule, which is carrying stuff around like drugs. That happens in the airport, or it kind of happens everywhere in the public space. And then there are those where you're hurting people, and those where you're hurting people are things like explosives. With explosives, there's a very specific, fairly sophisticated, not fully disclosed kind of strategy around that. But a big part of it is looking at is that, so just to give a bit of example of that, I cannot give you an example from an airport because there are no publicly available ones, but there's one really interesting one that happened in 2021. And in 2021, one day before the January 6th insurrection and all of that, January 5th at 10 p.m. at night until 2 a.m. in the morning during this period, there was a person who placed two pipe bombs, one in front of the DNC and one in front of the RNC. And that person has not been caught yet. Okay. So, in fact, in this year, the FBI released new images of that person. So, we still don't know who it is. We now know his shoe size. Okay. So, we know. Everybody of a size 12 Nike is like, right, like in the list. But essentially, when we took those images, we took just the FBI images that they sent and we put that into our system. The system immediately identified the possibility that this individual that was seen in six different cameras is a person looking to drop a timed explosive device. What was the system identifying? The system identified three things. They identified that they were carrying a backpack which got lighter, and it got lighter both in terms of being the weight. It's actually also lighter in terms of their emotions attached to it. So they were carrying it on their back like this, and then by the time of the end of the day, they were like holding on one side. So they were pretty happy with the bag being empty. That was number one. The second thing was that they sat down and on different benches across the place, across DC. Um, and they just sat down for less than 5 minutes. So not long enough to be a tired person. Um, and then just they were essentially going to place a bomb under a bench twice, but they just sat down five different times for a very short period of time. And so if you were a investigator and I said these were the five images, look at these five things. Can you identify a person who might be dropping a bomb? Most FBI investigators would look at those five images and say, yes, there's a chance high enough for you to go and check it out.
Mhm.
Okay. Our system would take the same data and come to the same conclusion, uh, but
But
do it within essentially 8 seconds and everyone at the same time. And do it for everyone at the same time. And so, and to some extent, you are taking not the data acquisition process and making it fast, yes, but the other thing is taking some of the reasoning component and also making that something that's very quick.
so
That's
the
kind of
AI
a
would
big part of it.
aggregate all that data and come up with a conclusion and let you know that Danger Will Robinson, check out this person.
That's right. That's right. And yeah, I mean, a big part of that is don't let AI make the final decisions. I think I definitely agree with that. We're not at the point where we want AI to make those decisions.
Okay.
But I think we are very close to the point where we can be listening to the AI's hypothesis on what the decisions are. And that's kind of the really interesting part of it.
So let me ask another question. How does unifying a human entity across multiple sensors and touch points reshape how you're understanding and protecting physical spaces?
Yeah.
Kind of
Uh,
that that example helped understand that question, but give me some more texture on it.
yeah. I think the simple way of thinking about it is that every system, computer vision or sensors, is seeing a fragmented event. So it's not seeing a thing happening, it's seeing one part of a thing happening, right? The classic example is the blind man meeting the elephant example, where essentially each person touches a different part of of the elephant and says that they're a different animal. It's kind of the same thing happening with sensors. Unifying the sensors often requires a master sensor. And what we do with our systems, we use computer vision as the master sensor. So I can see you being affected by the VOC, the smell sensor, and I can see you touching the X-ray machine. I can see you doing this, and I can aggregate this data together. The profile is then the thing that we can use to infer your behavior, right? So that's kind of a big part of it. Once you have that continuous behavioral profile, it's very similar to a relationship where you look at a person for a while and then you start to realize that you understand more about him. And that's kind of what the AI is doing. It obviously is a very short period of time. Usually, our AI has no more than 20 minutes from the first to the last time they will see you. But the interesting thing is that if at any point in time I can infer a intent of significance, whether it's a positive intent like shoppers, but a negative intent like a malicious intent, the thing is that we suddenly find ourselves in a very interesting place where even though I took 20 minutes to identify your intent, I now have plenty of time to respond to you. One of the things that we think about from when you talk about security is often you think about the moment of the event happening. The T tends to be the moment where the gun comes out. It's the moment of the event. If I take 20 minutes to identify your intent, I have all the time from that identification until the real T to talk to you. And that could be another 10 minutes. But it's so much more time to respond and respond in a much more controlled and nuanced and appropriate way than if I had to immediately respond to the critical event at that moment. Right. And so a lot of this kind of leads to much more appropriate responses and interactions. And I think that's a big part of how these systems work.
That's terrific. Well, guess what? 15 minutes is up and we just started to scratch the surface. We'll have to have more of a discussion. We're really out of time, but
No
thank
worries.
for helping us and me especially understand how AI is being employed to better understand human behavior and people's intent, especially in security systems in public places and for government agencies. It's being used, obviously, for more than just government agencies, as you pointed out, but I bet one of the primary areas government agencies are using it to help keep America safe or the world safe for that matter. How can our listeners contact you if they have questions?
So yeah, thank you so much. And if you're interested in more of what we're doing and you want to contact me, our company's website is loretta.io. And my own email is on that. It's Galvin@loretta.io.
You want to spell Loretta just so that the audience knows how.
Is LAURETTA.io.
Terrific. Galvin,
Yeah.
thank you very much. You were great. Um,
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ken. I
uh,
appreciate it.
For my audience, don't miss out on the next episode of Technology when we'll discuss how cutting edge technology is being implemented across many industries and the results it's having with these companies. Remember to please contact Performix Business Solutions at performixbiz.com if you need help with any technology challenge, large or small. I'm your host, Ken Umansky, and until we meet again on another technology podcast, please keep innovating.